all worried about Michelle. And I made a post on my blog and said, well, I'm not really sure, V2 hasn't been updated in 8 or 9 months. I'm not really sure what's next. And also V2 wasn't sort of the end-all be-all. As Dwight said, there were lots of other blogging platforms. There was Movable Type, which probably had 95% of the self-hosted market at the time. And it was ultra flexible, it had a plugin system, very cool. There was Blogger, which was obviously really easy. There's my personal favorite, Text Pattern, which was made by a guy called Dean Allen, who introduced me to typography. And it was just slick as all heck. If Text Pattern had been open source, there never would have been any WordPress. But it was under a proprietary license, so each one had something wrong with it. Like, what if we could combine these? And the co-founder of WordPress, Mike Little, just left a comment on my blog. That's how the whole thing started. He left a comment on the blog and said, if you're serious about this, we should work together. WordPress has never been a solo activity. If it would, none of y'all would be here. And we started working together. And a friend in Houston, Christine Selleck, who might or might not be here, came up with a name. She was an active blogger. I started going to the Houston blogger meetups, got really into it. And thus WordPress was born. I guess at this point I'm attending, I should be attending classes at University of Houston. I should have been attending. But I was getting more and more into the tech side of things. And WordPress started to grow. It was eventually adopted by a company out in San Francisco called CNET, who's using it to power some of those ZDNet blogs and a few other things. I was really into, at the time, it was sort of the early days of search engine optimization. I had this dream to be the first hit on Google for when you search for Matt. So perhaps coincidentally, every copy of WordPress included a link to all the developers, one of which being me, so a link to Matt. So I started to get thousands and tens of thousands of links to my site. And I never thought it would actually happen, so I had blogged that if I ever got to be the first result for Matt, I would just take all my sites down and stop, because you got to go out on top, right, like Michael Jordan. And this, much to my surprise, actually happened. So one day I got to be the first result on Google. I think my mom called me because she would search every day and click and click my link because thought it would help. And it did, thank you, Mom. And so I thought, well, man, what am I going to do now? So I replaced my entire website with just this one black page with a screenshot of the thing, because I thought it was only going to happen for a day or two. I thought maybe someone at Google was messing with me for a day or two. And I said, well, let's celebrate. I'm going to go out to San Francisco and visit my friend. His name was Tantek Chelik. I forgot a key part of the story. South by Southwest. You all ever been to South by Southwest? Man, what a Texas treasure. I mentioned Zeldman. This is where I got totally off track. So remember the Palm Pilot thing, right? So you used to be able to do this thing, which was you could replace all your icons on the Palm Pilot. And there was, I think it was called Silver Stripe or Silver Screen or something like that. Sort of be a theme for your grayscale Palm Pilot. And they had different icon sets. And one of these icon sets was basically old vintage pictures of old movie stars. So you'd have, what are the names? Like Frank, what's the guy? Clark Gable and Audrey Hepburn and things like that. And just sort of stylized icons of them. I found these icons, which brought me to Zeldman.com. And I just got blown away, because Zeldman at the time was a well-known web designer, a fantastic web guy, coming from print on the web, and was sort of just discovering web standards, which was pretty revolutionary at the time, because to design websites, what you would do then is you would basically make a bunch of tables that were highly complex, and then take a 1-by-1 pixel image and sort of stretch it out and contort it in weird ways to create the layout of the page. And it was just sort of the early days of CSS and HTML and everything like that. And so I was reading this blog, and he says, I'm going to go into Austin, Texas to speak at South by Southwest. And that just blew my mind. I was like my idol is going to be in Texas, and my sister lived in Texas. So South by Southwest had a student discount, but I didn't have a lot of money, so I actually wrote a hot check to get a ticket for South by Southwest. My parents gave me their gas card, so I drove up there, and I stayed with my sister, who was you were in Pflugerville at the time, right? Or still. And so I was driving in and out from Pflugerville every day to South by Southwest. And I think it was the second day, and everyone was going to this dinner at a Mexican restaurant. It might have been called La Luna or something like that. And I got there, and there was a table like 50 or 60 people. And they sort of started filling in from the sides, and I got there a little bit late, so I was in the middle, and like the 3 or 4 seats around me were empty, and I was like, man, this is kind of a bummer. Like the first time there, like, do I smell funny? I mean, the entire table is full except for these 3 or 4 seats around me. And it turns out that they were being held. And so the people who sat down were Contact Shelik, who was the lead developer of IE5 for the Macintosh, Eric Meyer, who wrote the book on CSS, and Zeldman and his wife, Carrie. And I was like, oh my goodness. This is like being, being a music fan and like Prince and Sting and like Elvis sitting across the table. I won't say who's who in that analogy. I was just blown away. And through the course of it, somehow I got in an argument with Tantek, who was sitting next to me on HTML, which in hindsight was the silliest thing I've probably ever done, because this guy kind of wrote a lot of it. But actually, we kept up the email after that, and it led to the creation of microformats. The very first microformat, which was called XFN, and the basis for microformats, which is something called XMDP. We started coordinating on this together. And so he had invited me out to San Francisco. So I go out to San Francisco, and it was kind of interesting. Who's been to San Francisco? Man, oh wow, it's a good chunk of the audience. It's a nice place, isn't it? You step off the plane, you're like, wow, free air conditioning. This is pretty swell. I had an interesting San Francisco experience because I didn't ride a cable car. In fact, I still haven't ridden a cable car. I didn't see the Golden Gate Bridge. I didn't go to Alcatraz. But I visited Yahoo and Google and CNET. I went to all the tech companies around there. It was like, I don't know, like seeing the sites. It was completely amazing. And when I returned back, it was kind of the summertime. When I returned back, a lot of them knew I was there. Oh, to tie it back to that, a lot of them knew I was there because I posted I was going to San Francisco on this sort of black memorial page for the first hit on Google. One of them reached out, and after I left, they kept in touch, and some of them talked about jobs or things like that. But the most interesting was CNET, because they were a media company, not a technology company like a Yahoo or Google. So they actually were willing to give an exclusion that basically said I could retain all the intellectual property rights to any open source code I created, particularly WordPress, and that they would allow me to devote a portion of my time, like 20 or 30%, to just working on WordPress. It's like, wow, this is a dream job. They'll offer me an amazing salary. They moved me out to San Francisco. This is like the job I would hope to get when I graduated. So it became, I won't say it was a quick decision, Mom and Dad, to drop out of college, but it was just a very unique opportunity. And so I moved out to San Francisco. And that is actually, the rest of the WordPress story is actually pretty well documented, because this was about a year and a half, 2 years in, and it really started to take off. Movable Type had switched our license, and so a lot of people were switching to WordPress. We had the 1.2 release, which introduced plugins, the 1.5 release when I was at CNET, which was the first to introduce themes. And these are sort of the basic building blocks of WordPress that really just started to pick up adoption. It's funny, because the first 5 users of WordPress, actually we had like 4 developers and like 2 users. My site and one other was the only one using it. So the first 5 or 6 WordPress sites were actually just friends from high school and college that I set up sites for, because there was no one else to use it. But at this point, it was getting like 100 downloads a day, 200 downloads a day. And just very organically has grown ever since then. One person at a time, just a little bit more. Now we're doing something crazy, like 50 or 60,000 downloads every single day, even on Saturdays and Sundays on weekends. And we estimate there's around 25 or 26 million WordPress blogs in the world, including hopefully a few in this room. So that is the Houston version of the WordPress story. You can't talk about what high school you went to in those towns. People are like, why does it matter?